Hello, I'm Terry Christensen, and this is Valley Politics, recorded for the first time in the new Create TV studios on South 2nd Street. November 8th was an important election for San Jose and Santa Clara County, with city voters choosing a new mayor and 3 council members, and county voters electing our first new sheriff in 24 years, as well as a new supervisor for South County. We'll talk about the outcome in all these races and try to figure out what happened and why with our guests, Spotlight San Jose's Tran Nguyen and San Jose State University professor Garrick Percival. And that's what's coming up on Valley Politics. Welcome, everyone, and welcome Tran Nguyen and Garrick Percival.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Let's get right to it, bearing in mind that as we record this, votes are still being counted, so we don't have final results. We're projecting a little bit. Garrick, you get us started. What do you think happened in the mayor's race?
Well, in this race, I think we're seeing a lot like we did in 2014. We have a big division in the west side of the city, wealthier side of the city, the east side of San Jose, higher turnout on the west side. Looks like those margins are going in favor of Matt Mahan. We don't know exactly what those margins look like, and there's still quite a bit of vote out there. But I think the important thing to acknowledge about this race is sort of the trajectory. It's very hard to see how that's really going to change in this race, even as the overall vote totals go up, unless Chavez is able to, get more votes on the east side, break into some of Mahan's votes on the west side. It's difficult to see her winning this race.
Yeah, it's 52% for Mahan right now and 48% for Chavez. In my experience, that gap doesn't change very much as the rest of the votes are counted, but there are a lot of votes still to be counted.
There are, and I think it's still going to be a close race.
Yeah.
I don't see the gap growing in any significant way, but again, it's tough to know, but it's hard to see Mahan losing at this point, I think.
Tran, tell us about the money in this race.
Yeah, well, as you all may know, this has been a very expensive race, probably one of the most expensive in San Jose history.
Oh, it is the most expensive in San Jose history, I can tell you.
All right. Well, outside spending from PACs, from special interests, has been tremendous, specifically for Cindy Chavez. I believe as of last week, special interest spending has been up to $3.4 million.
Wow.
Just for Cindy Chavez. And obviously, we also have the candidates themselves spending a lot of money. In total, this race have cost more than $8 million just for these two, to compete in this mayoral race. With Cindy, we have the South Bay Labor Council, San Jose Police Union. We also have the 49ers football team spending a lot of money on mailers, on ads, especially attack ads on Mahan, calling him out on his association with the NRA, questioning his stance on abortion and things like that. On the other hand, you have, the current mayor, Sam Liccardo's PAC, Common Good, also spending a lot of money on consulting, on pollings, and sharing those information with other PACs that have spent also a lot of money on helping him and boosting his profile. And I think it has been working because Chavez was the front runner in the June primary.
She was.
And now, as we see with new results coming in, Mahan just continued to extend his lead over her. So it's been very interesting, and yeah.
A lot of negative campaigning, hits on both candidates, usually from the independent expenditure political action committees, some pretty vicious. I think the hits on Chavez worked better than the hits on Mahan. Some of the hits on Mahan, the choice issue, the NRA issue, those were pushing it a little bit to really pin the guilt on him. To me, what happened was Mahan, although he's on the city council, managed to run as the outsider and the agent of change. Chavez, not on the city council, but on the board of supervisor, but she was on the city council, 20 years in public office.
Yep.
I think she came the candidate of the status quo, unfairly, but nevertheless representing conditions as they are now, at a time when a lot of voters are very unhappy with the way things are. You've both heard the two big issues, homelessness and crime, trash and blight too. And Chavez has a pretty good record on some of those issues. I think she addressed them during the campaign, but still she was somehow the incumbent, the representative of the status quo, and he was the agent of change.
Yeah, the homelessness issue is I think a really important one. This election cycle, we've been hearing a lot about gas prices and how politically important those have been and caused a lot of families to struggle with rising costs. But one of the things that gas prices is so important is because people see the price on the corner. Homelessness in San Jose, I think, is so visible. It's visible on the sides of the streets and the underpasses. And despite the effort by both the city and county to deal with it, the problem has gotten worse. And I think that's given Mahan the capacity, as you said, to run as an outsider, where Chavez set herself up, even though she's not an incumbent in this race, but she acted like one in the sense that she's been in office for a long time, working on these issues, sold herself as someone who's very knowledgeable, which she certainly is on the issue.
Yeah.
The problem got worse during the pandemic.
One other observation I would make about this race, and it applies to some of the council races too, I think more voters actually got to see the candidates performing in candidate forums than ever before. In the olden days of candidate forums, you won't remember, Tran, but we do, a candidate forum would be held and 30 or 40 people would show up. Now, the Willow Glen Neighborhood Association streams the candidate forum, and I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people watch it. And there were lots of, Spotlight did a forum that also was streamed. San Jose State University did a forum that was streamed. Valley Politics did the candidates. So thousands of people were actually able to see them in a different way. And I guess the message to me there is maybe Mahan won over more people than Chavez managed to do. Let's talk about the map, Garrick.
The map?
The map.
Of the mayor's race?
Yeah. Which parts of town went which way?
Yeah, well, it was really interesting that the primary was Chavez was able to run ahead, I think, of Liccardo in 2014 when Liccardo ran for mayor for the first time, and she picked up some votes in Willow Glen and Cambria and the west side of the city. The question really for her was whether she could be able to maintain that or even build on it in the general. And it looks like she did not. She lost ground, that Mahan was able to pick up some votes in those areas. Also, I think a really interesting area is Berryessa, part of the city, where he seems to have run very strongly, arguably stronger than Cortese did in 2014. So we'll see. Of course, again, as we said, a lot more votes still to come. But he also made inroads into Evergreen neighborhoods, and so that may allow him, let's see, when all the votes are counted, to win by a larger margin than Liccardo did in
2014 it was David Cortese versus Sam Liccardo. Sam Liccardo won the west side substantially, and voter turnout's higher there, so that's important.
Right.
But there was a pretty clear line down the middle of the city, and Cortese won the east side. Right. Well, it changed a little bit this time. As you said, Mahan made significant inroads in Berryessa, also expanded what Liccardo had been able to do in the villages area in Evergreen, expanded beyond the villages in Silver Creek, high turnout area as well. On the other hand, Chavez picked up some precincts in the west side in District 1 and a few in District 6 and 9. So a little bit of shifting around. I guess one more thing about Chavez that may have made her seem like the incumbent, the establishment candidate. If you went to her website and you had to scroll down quite a ways before you got beyond all the elected officials who were endorsing her. Every assembly member, every Congress member, every council member except Matt Mahan, county supervisors, down the line, before you get to just actual people and organizations, which made her look even more like the establishment candidate, I think. And I wonder, maybe people don't have deep enough roots in San Jose to care who Anna Eshoo and Zoe Lofgren endorse or even know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe slightly a San Jose phenomenon.
Right, and Tran has been doing great reporting on the endorsements. I think endorsements matter a lot in politics, but for a lot of voters, particularly voters in general elections who don't pay that close attention to politics, who do their civic duty and vote, but aren't living this stuff like a lot of people do, especially voters who turn out in primary elections are much more engaged. They likely don't know who their city council member is.
That's right.
And members of Congress. So I think it's sort of questionable about how important these kinds of endorsements
are.
The
endorsements that really matter are organizational endorsements that bring with them the money that Tran was talking about, but also volunteers. So when labor endorses, they spent $800,000 in the Political Action Committee, something like that, a lot.
Yeah, a lot of money, I think.
But they also can generate thousands of volunteer shifts with their membership. And so that's one reason I thought Chavez was likely to carry the day, but it was not enough.
One thing I would also like to add, something that I just noticed today is on election day, actually the people who voted at polling places actually turned out for Matt Mahan more than Cindy Chavez. I think the number was 10,000 versus 6,000. So that's also a pretty interesting stat from the election day itself.
Okay, so they voted on election day and they got counted on election day. Their votes are in the count, which might mean that the mail-in ballots that are still being counted could favor Chavez more and could shift things around. Although we're skeptical, aren't we, Garrick?
Well, right. I think even the mail-in ballots have been counted so far that Mahan was ahead there too. So I think on both the same
true.
day. So
shut down that theory.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks
a lot.
It's possible, but probably not very likely.
Anything else on the mayor's race? Any other comments you want to make?
No, I think one of the things if Mahan wins would be sort of looking to the future. How does he govern? I think we'll talk.
We're going to
that.
come to that. Let's look at the council he's going to be dealing with before we talk about that. So I'm going to start off with districts 3 and 5, and you two can join in, of course. So Omar Torres, San Jose State University political science alumnus, overwhelmed Irene Smith. This is a race that I'm not too worried about more votes getting counted and changing the ratio, because Omar has 63% of the vote as we record this to Irene Smith's 37%. He ran a strong campaign, strong support across the board from the liberal Democratic political establishment, like Cindy had, but it worked better for him apparently. Labor and labor volunteer shifts, Democratic Party, Dems and Labor did independent expenditure mailings for Omar. But I think the thing Omar really had on his side was the demographics of the district. Mm-hmm. The voting age population of the district is 36% Latino. Mm-hmm. And Omar has deep roots in that community.
Right.
32% white, 25% Asian, 5% black, just to round it off. That's not a good set of demographic data for Irene Smith, my neighbor, white person, local activist, whose supporters tended to be more on the conservative side, including the Silicon Valley Biz group that is the sort of former Chamber of Commerce. Running in a liberal district, even though I think she ran a pretty good campaign and a pretty vigorous campaign, 37% of the vote, that really reflects the district. And you know what? She didn't even win her own precinct. Mm-hmm. She's lived in Nagley Park for a long time. She didn't win a single precinct in all of Nagley Park. So big challenge for her. I might add, one of the surprises in this race was the Mercury News endorsed Omar Torres. Mm-hmm. Mercury rarely endorses labor candidates. They endorsed Mahan for the mayor's race, but they endorsed 3 labor endorsed candidates for the city council races in 3, 5, and 7. Pretty amazing. And I think that helped Omar significantly, particularly with the more traditional older and white voters in his district. So a vigorous campaign by both. Demographics, I think, really determined the outcome there. Tran, what was the money like in that race? Were they about even, or?
I would say Irene Smith has more momentum in the primary. She definitely outraised him in terms of contribution, but then in the general, that's kind of flipped.
Yeah.
So he's outrace, outspend her. It also really helps that, you know, he has labor camp spending $100,000
Oh yeah, that helps.
helping his campaign. So I think that's really round up and really explain his potential victory here.
And the Democratic Party did 1 or 2 independent expenditure mailings for him too.
Yeah, definitely.
Gary, comments on this race?
Well, I think it was a really interesting race. As you were noting, someone like Irene Smith, her profile, you know, candidate of her profile in the sense of sort of centrist, business-oriented candidates, has had a very hard time getting votes in District 3. We haven't seen anyone who finished second place leapfrog over the person to win the general at any time in the last 20, 25 years that I know of. So it was a real tough, you know, uphill climb for her. You know, but in terms of you know, the overall policy and sort of orientation of Omar Torres, I think very similar to Raul Perales, who's been termed out. So I think we're not going to see a big shift in terms of policy emphasis that comes out of that district.
Yeah. You know, a candidate really has to be a good fit for the district. And that shows up in all of these races, I think. Let's go on to Council District 5. That's the east side. And that district is 46% Latino. It's the highest Latino percentage of eligible voters of any district, but 37% were Asian. And so there's a big Vietnamese population there. It's particularly Vietnamese in that district. This was a really tight race between 2 candidates pretty well known in the district, with close ties, close connections to the Latino communities in the district. And I say Latino communities because it does vary within the Latino framework. Peter Ortiz is winning as we speak by about 6%, 53% to 47%. That's a pretty good lead. I suspect it will hold. It's a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, I think, because Nora Campos had held that council seat. I think she was in office for 10 years because she went in midterm one year, and then she was an assembly member from that district. Right. So an elected official for something like 16 years. And then her brother succeeded her on the city council. So like it's the best known name in the district, but it didn't work this time. And I think a couple of things might explain that. One is she hasn't been as engaged with the district at the grassroots level for a while, and Peter Ortiz has, organizing small businesses, working with the Mayfair community on some planning issues and others. So pretty close connection to current activists in the district. And I think maybe he did better at reaching out to the Vietnamese community as well. H.G. Nguyen ran in the primary, and I can't remember the percentage she got, but it was significant.
She came in third.
She came in third. She endorsed Peter Ortiz, and she carries some clout in that community. So I suspect outreach to the Vietnamese community, better connections to current Latino activists, and at least enough money. Tran?
Yeah. I have not followed this race very closely, but I would say, you know, Nora Campos actually outraced and outspent Peter. But in this race, I think, again, back to the labor camp, you know, spending a lot of money on Peter Ortiz, trying to get his name out, you know, walking the district. I think that really works for him.
And I would say too, you know, it's very possible, as you were mentioning earlier, Terry, about the overall political climate, if people are looking for just someone new, you know, certainly Peter Ortiz represented that in a lot of important ways. So that could also have helped him as well.
He also got the endorsement of the Mercury News.
Right.
Which doesn't hurt.
Right.
So on to District 7. Tran's going to take us through that district.
Sure. This has been a pretty big surprise to me with District 7, with incumbent Councilmember Maya Esparza is now losing to her challenger, a Vietnamese American candidate. Obviously, this district made up of a lot of Vietnamese. This is a big Vietnamese American voting bloc, and I think he's right now, as of we speaking right now, he's leading her by 13 points. And Esparza almost won outright in the primary for this re-election. So I think one thing that would really tell me is that it's really proved the power of the Vietnamese vote. In District 7 specifically, we saw this bloc basically was split in half in the primary because of Van Lê, who's now just ran for Eastside School Board again.
And won.
And won,
Yeah.
yes. So she won again in that seat, but she just could not break into, the District 7 seat. We'll see what's going to happen, but as of now, the gap is so big that I don't know if Esparza are going to be able to come back. Again, I think here, maybe this is another example of special interest and independent expenditure spending really help the challenger here. The Santa Clara County Association of Realtors kind of jumped into this race kind of last minute in October and spent $100,000 on mailers to attack Esparza.
Some really mean ones.
Right, very, very mean, I would say. And Esparza, we talked, and she said, "Look, I don't understand these allegations because I did not miss these votes." And that's the accusation that they made against her. But it appears to work. And, doesn't matter that she got the endorsement of the firefighter union, which is obviously Bin Duan's, department.
He's a firefighter.
He's a fire captain.
Yeah.
He's been there for, a couple of decades. And still, that apparently is not enough for Esparza for re-election.
Yeah, really, that race for me was the biggest surprise of the council races in this cycle. It's very difficult to see her overcoming that deficit. No. And but I think too, we've been hearing a lot of discussion about the lack of Vietnamese American representation on the city council, and it did seem to be a real galvanizing force in terms of organizing and turnout. Of course, we don't have those numbers yet, but it will be interesting to see.
Yeah, he would be the 5th Vietnamese American city council in San Jose, which, yeah.
But I think just in the last couple of years, there's been a real palpable sense of urgency in the Vietnamese American community. We should have a representative.
Right.
We should have a representative. Esparza's best shot, as you pointed out, was in the primary with the opponents to split the vote.
Right.
She just needed a couple percentage more, but she didn't get it.
Right.
But I've also heard she did not do a good job of reaching out to the Vietnamese community. She didn't have anybody Vietnamese American on her staff after the first year or so. And you need to be working with your community in general.
Definitely. That's definitely one of the biggest complaints I've heard from the Vietnamese community itself, is that we've never seen our council member. Where are our council member? And I think that's reflecting their votes now.
So what's it all add up to for Matt Mahan if he's going to be mayor? Can he work with this new city council? 3 new members, right? And there will be presumably 2 vacancies on the council, because we're going to talk about Sylvia Arenas' run for supervisor in just a minute, but Matt Mahan will vacate his council seat. So what do you think, Garrick? Can he? Is this a council he can work with?
Well, it will be interesting. The dynamics will be interesting, I think, for the first couple of months on the job.
I think for the first couple of years.
Yeah, a couple of years. I was saying, putting aside maybe some hard feelings about no one endorsed him, during the campaign. So he's going to be working with council members who all opposed supported his opponent. But I think look, these are they're politicians. I think at the end of the day, in the sense that they are also representatives of the city. I think they're going to let all the sort of campaigning, put that in the past and get to work. So I do see him being able to to govern, to build perhaps new coalitions along different lines, and maybe we've seen thus far. It's hard to know, but. So it's
I'm not so sure.
Skeptical.
He's going to have one ally, Van Droen, from District 7. Then there are the moderate to conservative council members, Pam Foley and Dev Davis. Then there's the block of 5, even after Arenas leaves, 5 labor-friendly, progressive, that caucus, and they're going to be organized, and they're going to be pushy.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a challenge. But I will say, in support of your argument, we said the same thing about Chuck Reed when he got elected in 2006. He was a loner. He voted. He was the 10-1. He was the one in a 10-1 vote on the council, and he eventually pulled the council over. Among other things, he appointed the Vietnamese representative then, Madison Nguyen, as vice mayor, and that kind of pulled her into into his orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So a mayor has some capacity to win friends and influence council colleagues.
And I do think that he has an incentive. Like, you know, we're going to have another election in 2 years. You know, so he has a lot of incentive to, I think creatively, build new alliances, even if there aren't ones that someone like him might normally make because of that.
That's a really good point to remind people that this mayor, if it's Matt Mahan, could serve for 10 years.
Right.
Because this first term is 2 years for the first election during a presidential cycle, and then he can run again after that. So it could be a total of 10 years. So this is a truly significant race.
And how he ran in this time may be very different next time. We'll see.
So Garrick, we're getting a little bit short on time, but we want to talk about the county races quickly. So run us through county supervisor and sheriff.
Yeah, so county supervisor, District 1, redistricted this time. A lot more voters in San Jose than there were if this race was happening a couple of years ago.
I think you just used the key word in the outcome of this districting, redistricting. Go on, sorry to interrupt.
And you know, so I think Johnny Camus and Sylvia Arenas, I think if Camus had, of course, in a perfect world, he would have run in the old district, which would have included, where he lived, also included more conservative areas like Los Gatos. It's a close race right now, within 3 or 4 points, I believe. I think it's going to be hard for Camus to win this. I think Arenas, being from, representing Evergreen, a lot of votes in that part of the district, I suspect she'll probably pull this out. But Camus is a good candidate. It's good. I think it would be fairly close.
It's actually 6 point difference
6 points?
as we record this.
Got it.
And he did build some strength in the South County, but she really had strength in the Evergreen area and pulled in a lot of votes there. Sheriff?
And then the sheriff's race has also been really interesting. Of course, we all know a lot of scandal around Lori Smith, the current sheriff. Bob Johnson.
She's not the current sheriff anymore.
She resigned.
The recently
resigned sheriff. Thank you for that. Bob Johnson and Kevin Jensen are the two candidates. Really, this race was about reform. Who was the best reformer? Whether it's someone like Kevin Jensen, who argued he knew the organization inside and out, versus Bob Johnson, who was running from the outside. Former Palo Alto police chief, and with a lot of experience down in Los Angeles in the sheriff's organization there. Johnson is running ahead here, which is, I find a little surprising, because Jensen spent a lot of money and far outspent him. But I think if this stays the way it is right now, I think it really shows that, one, a lot of people paying more attention to the sheriff's race than they ever did before because of all the scandal. And then also people feeling like the organization needs a radical change, and Johnson, being the outsider, may be best positioned to do that.
Totally agree. Tran? Comment on either of these races.
Well, I think what I can say about these two races is money didn't really matter in these two races. Obviously, Kevin Jensen and Johnny Camus brought in a lot of money, spent a lot of money, and still they are behind. So it's like Garrick said, it's really about the population, and because of redistricting specifically in the South County Supervisor District, that really benefited Arenas in this case.
Made her a better fit for that district and brought her base into that district.
Definitely.
And I agree, Garrick, on the sheriff's race, insider versus outsider, and a lot of people must have thought time for an outsider. Right. But it's not over.
It's not over.
Remind everybody, none of these are over as we record this. So we'll keep watching, and maybe we'll be right about some of our prognostication here, or not. That's happened. Well, that's all the time we have today. Tran, Nguyen, and Garrick, Percival, thank you very much for being with us.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be back in January with Mayor Sam Liccardo taking a look back at his 16 years as council member and mayor. And maybe we'll get him to talk about what's next for him. Meanwhile, you can follow us on Facebook, and you can catch up on all our previous shows on our website at createtvsj.org, or on YouTube by searching for Create TV San Jose. And now, that's all, folks. Thanks for watching.